Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my official college football week number 12 top 10 best bets, where I go through some of my favorite bets here for college football week number 12 as we wind down the season. Beginning with number 10, it is Minnesota traveling to Ohio State. Boy, that was an unfortunate break last week. Anyone that had the Ohio State-Michigan State over, what was the over-under in that game? 45-46. It was 38-3 with like 12 minutes left in the third quarter, and it finished 38-3. But there's going to be a self-correction here. Kyle McCord playing better, Minnesota's quarterback playing very well, and Ohio State's defense, they've been really good, but I did see them give up some kind of big plays against Michigan State. The running back had like a few really nice carries. I think Minnesota can score some, maybe a touchdown in the first quarter, maybe a touchdown in the fourth quarter in garbage time. Some type of combination gets them to 17 points. The Buckeyes with Kyle McCord trying to get Marvin Harrison Jr. the Heisman. He'll probably have multiple touchdowns. Trevion Henderson. The only thing you have to really guard against in this game is the fact that Ohio State, they're going to want to get out of here in one piece. They've got the huge matchup with Michigan coming up. They are sitting minus 27.5, but it is a situation where I think Minnesota can score enough to help us get over 48. And also, it's another chance for Kyle McCord after really his first complete game to show that he is improving, and it was really impressive last week against a bad Michigan State team. But let's understand Minnesota and how bad their defense was against Purdue last week. They're not much better. Moving on to number 9, it is UL Monroe at Ole Miss. So this is kind of a Russian roulette type thing here when you go in on a massive number like minus 36, but I think it's low enough to where as long as Ole Miss has an offensive explosion kind of off of their bad game last week against Georgia, they get around a 50 burger, they should very easily cover a 36-point spread. It starts getting really bad when it gets to like minus 45 or minus 50. That's what Alabama Chattanooga, that line is probably going to be, and that's where it gets a little bit more fluky because you could be up 48-0 playing your backups, and then Chattanooga gets a garbage time touchdown and they cover. When the line's down to 36, it's a little bit more manageable to where as long as Ole Miss gets to 50, do we really think UL Monroe is scoring I mean, I guess I do have UL Monroe scoring 13, but this would just be total garbage time. I think Ole Miss with their offense, they're going to score a bunch, especially coming off that terrible loss they had to Georgia. Moving on to number 8, it is Texas traveling to Iowa State. So yes, I am once again fading Texas. Texas was around a 10-point favorite last week on the road at TCU, and they almost lost outright. They win by 3 points. Now they're facing a very fiery Iowa State team. And this Iowa State team, their identity is completely different. They throw the football. And I could see this being an upset. I'm not going to pick it. I've got 31-28, but Iowa State plus the 8. There's phenomenal value on it based off the fact that this Texas team, they haven't shown that they can blow teams out. We saw the game against Houston. They possibly could have lost that sitting as 20-point favorites. They barely beat Kansas State. They were without Quinn Ewers. We understand that. But still, this is a Texas team that normally is involved in close games and an Iowa State team that really is hitting their stride after the blowout win. Who they faced last week, BYU. They won like 45-13. It was a 10:30 game, so nobody remembers it. But this Iowa State team looks good. Another 8 o'clock game. It seems like Texas is playing all these games at night now. I will take Iowa State with the value. Moving on to number 7. Maybe this is just a little bit of an outsmarting myself move right here, going with the over on an Iowa game. At some point, it has to happen, right? I mean, if you bet the under on Iowa, you've made so much money, but now I'm pulling an Uno reverse. I like this Illinois team. The backup QB throws for 500 passing yards last week. No, he's not going to replicate it against a good Iowa defense on the road. But it just seems like one of these Iowa games is bound to go over at some point. 30.5 is a low number. We saw Iowa's offense. They did have right around 400 yards of total offense last week. They scored into the 20s. I'm liking the over, cautiously liking the over, believe it or not, in an Iowa game. This is probably, I don't know if it's going to get bet down because Iowa did show some things on offense last week, and Illinois had a crazy explosion, but this is obviously a different beast. Iowa's defense is really good. Moving on to number 6, it is Utah traveling to Arizona. So I definitely think this is a correction game, meaning that Arizona has 3 losses. Does Utah have 3 losses or 2 losses? I don't know. Either way, I do think Arizona wins this game. It's basically a pick-em, and I've got them winning fairly easily. This is like Arizona's Super Bowl because they started the season completely irrelevant. They had multiple losses. They were close losses, but nobody was paying attention to them. And now they've completely turned it on. They're ranked. They're going to be inside of the top 20, even with those 3 losses, and they're facing another team that they can beat. They've got, I wouldn't say they have the talent edge, but certainly at home, it's a pick'em game. The analytics slightly favor Utah. I have been off of Utah forever. And quite honest, I think I just probably misread Utah. Like, I thought Utah had a horrible offense. Turns out their offense is actually decent. That was just a bad read on my part. But, I mean, you look at the Utah team, they were terrible on offense there for a time, but they've kind of turned it on. I don't know. Either way, I like Arizona to win this game relatively easily. Maybe a surprise to some people that do like Utah, Arizona winning here by 13. And basically a pick-em. Moving on to number 5, it is Oklahoma traveling to BYU. So we're doing another one of these games where I don't know how this game is in Utah and it's taking place at noon. I will take the value in the under just because, you know, you don't want to over-speculate, but these kids getting up at like 10 a.m. to play this game. BYU's been terrible this season. They're onto their backup quarterback. Oklahoma, they're a really good team for sure with Dylan Gabriel, but they've had games where they've been lackluster on offense as well. This is a sleeper, okay? It's a sleeper. 57.5 is a relatively high number. If this game was on at 3:30, I could understand an over 57.5, but in this situation, Oklahoma with a solid defense, Brett Venables, I will take, especially with Oklahoma having their offensive explosion last week. What did Dylan Gabriel have? 8 total touchdowns. I think he's due for kind of an easier type game where maybe he only has 3 or 4 touchdowns. Oklahoma wins, but we do get the under 57.5. You're not going to score 8 touchdowns every week. Moving on to number 4. It is North Carolina traveling to Clemson. How about North Carolina, man? How far has North Carolina fallen? They're literally ranked. They have 2 losses, and they're 7-point underdogs to a Clemson team who's barely above 500, but Clemson is good. I'm just going to take the value in North Carolina. This should be a really fun 3:30 game. I'm expecting it to be relatively high scoring. We might get an overtime type affair. North Carolina, though, they still only have 2 losses. They're very motivated in these games. I think it's going to be close. North Carolina, the value of the 6.5 seems too good to be true. Although I will say this game kind of reminds me of the Notre Dame Clemson game where, you know, everyone was like, oh, Notre Dame opens -1. It immediately gets bet up to -3, and then Notre Dame loses outright. It's understandable, but 6.5 is a little bit too much. It was 7.5 and it got bet down. I will take North Carolina there. Moving on to number 3, it is Washington traveling to Oregon State, and I love the over in this game. This should be a higher scoring game. I did see the line movement. Washington opened 1-point favorites. Now they're 2.5-point underdogs to a good Oregon State team. It's going to be back and forth. This is a chance for Michael Penix Jr. to have a Heisman moment against a really solid Oregon State team. And for Oregon State, they've got 2 really tough games remaining. If they win this one, there is going to be a lot at stake in the Civil War, the Oregon State game, because Oregon State at that point will be very likely will be a top 10 team, because if they beat Washington, they're going to be a top 10 team. So that'll be a top 10 battle, the rivalry. But this game should be very high scoring. DJ Uiagalelei has had a really good year. I believe over 20 touchdown passes, only 4 interceptions. And then Washington, we know their defense isn't the best, but they do have an extremely high octane offense. 38-35, we get a very easy over 58. I would have the over-under in this game into the 60s personally. Moving on to number 2, it is kind of a crappy SEC matchup. Florida traveling to Missouri. And to me, the value on this, like 58 is just a higher number. I know Graham Mertz has been good this year, only the 2 interceptions. Missouri, they can score for sure. I don't know, man. 58 seems like it's too much to me. You know what? Do I actually... Oh, no, I have the total being 40. Yeah, I mean, I could very easily see like a 31-17 type game, and it's way under the 58. I don't know what they're smoking with 58 and an over-under in this game. I just do not trust the Florida offense enough to really go in on something like that. So I will take Missouri. They're going to continue their momentum. They're sitting right now -11. I would probably stay away from that, but if I had to bet it, I would go in on Missouri. And then moving on to number one, it is Oregon traveling to Arizona State. So Arizona State, they had the shocking game last week against UCLA. I'm not going to overreact to it. You have an Oregon team sitting -22.5. It's very obvious Oregon is really trying to get Bo Nix the Heisman. They're the type of university that will run up the score because they understand the marketing ability. If you get a Heisman Trophy winner, it's huge. This is just a pure Heisman stats game for Bo Nix. It's 4 or 5 passing touchdowns. It's extreme efficiency. It's no interceptions. Keeping him in late into the third quarter, maybe into the fourth quarter. 22.5 to me. It's been down a little bit because Arizona State had that crazy performance against UCLA. I'm going to kind of write that off as a one-off fluke, and I'm going to take Oregon big here because there's a lot at stake for them. They're great in terms of their analytics. They understand ball control, game control. They're going to want to really pound Arizona State to keep their analytics being really good. They're top 3 right now in terms of FPI. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.